Hello, I'm Louis Ferrante. This is number 0814, the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuph File Program, number 0814. And coming up on this edition of the Stuph File Program, you'll meet Cynthia Moore, who is an award-winning playwright and performer who shifted gears and became a clinical psychologist. She shares her journey in the book, Dancing on Coals. How did she end up making that career switch?
Because I was in the theater, I was very extroverted and externally motivated. I was motivated to get recognition and acclaim and to be seen, and it was all very externalized. At a certain point, I realized that wasn't doing it for me. It wasn't actually what I needed. So I completely did a pivot and decided to go internal instead. And so I took a couple of classes in psychology, and I loved it.
Science writer Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is back to talk about several issues in space, including the long-awaited return of two NASA astronauts who were stranded in space for months on the International Space Station, all because of the failure of Boeing's Starliner.
This was a test mission, a shakedown mission of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. They've been going through a lot of cost overruns, huge schedule delays in development, and they've had a lot of hiccups with the Starliner thing, but this was kind of their final hurdle of having an actual human crew aboard for that 8-day test. And this was back in early June. But then when they got into space, they started getting all these technical issues.
And there's lots and lots of Stuph File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thoughts, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guests later. The person who told you this was show number 0814 was Louis Ferrante, the former mobster turned author who has written a series of books about the mafia. His latest one is Borgata, Clash of the Titans. And that's the second book in a trilogy. The third one will be coming out probably in November. By the way, he was on show number 0806 just a little while ago. You can go back and listen to that show talking about his book. And thank you very much, Louis, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuph File Program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. A couple of American tourists visiting Dublin, Ireland for St. Patrick's Day felt the wrath of the Irish after they tried to stiff a carriage driver. A video from the scene, and I have taken a look at this video, which, as you can imagine, is filled with expletives from both parties, shows the driver chasing the two men after their horse and carriage ride. When he catches the men, he whips them and demands, "Pay me now!" After several more strikes with his whip, one rider pulls out his wallet and says, I have money, I understand. But even after he's been paid, the driver whips them a few more times, to which one replies,
I'm sorry. Sorry. We learned our lesson. Thank you.
Here's a piece of advice. If you're planning to stiff someone out of their money, perhaps it's wise not to pick someone who every day in their business uses a whip. Yeah. In the wee hours of March 15th in Clearwater, Florida, 34-year-old Aaron Jablonski was really hoping to treat patrons of the Overtime Sports Bar to some karaoke. So when he found out the machine was out of order, Jablonski left the establishment upset about the music. Outside, a 26-year-old man tried to calm Jablonski down, but he produced a Glock 9mm pistol from his waistband, pointed it at the man, and then fired off a round. When police arrived, Jablonski still had the gun, a problem since he had previously been convicted of battery of a law enforcement officer. He was arrested for aggravated assault and, as a felon, in possession of a firearm. I'm sure he'll be a hit in the prison choir. By the way, the term karaoke is a Japanese word which translates to empty orchestra, which is interesting because initially I had always thought that the direct translation of the word karaoke was tone deaf. Okay, we have a couple of hapless criminals here who didn't die, but you could say they are Darwin File starter kits. First, an unidentified man in northeast Pennsylvania was nearly electrocuted and suffered third-degree burns on March 19th as he tried to steal copper wiring. When he broke into a transformer box and cut into a live high-voltage wiring, he knocked out power to about 1,500 homes and businesses nearby. The victim is in critical condition with burns to his face, neck, shoulders, chest, arms, and hands. Meanwhile, the day before, another copper thief suffered similar burns and actually caught on fire. I'm guessing both of these guys didn't do well in high school science classes. A 50-year-old Detroit man who uses a wheelchair tried to kill a cockroach by throwing his shoe at the pest. Unfortunately, the loaded revolver he had hidden in his shoe fell to the floor and discharged, hitting the man in the foot. He was reported to be in stable condition. After going to the hospital, no word on the cockroach's condition. There's an easier way, you know. From Johnson & Johnson. It wasn't a robe or a phone charger left behind in a room at the Pine Rivers Motel in Sheboygan, Michigan on March the 14th. Instead, when the cleaning crew arrived at the room, they looked under the bed and found Wally, a really friendly gator. The motel manager said he'd had no idea that an alligator was one of the guests in the room. He called the guest, who said he was taking Wally to elementary schools and showing him to children, but when he got up that morning, he couldn't find the reptile and assumed he'd gotten out. Said the manager, "You couldn't really miss it. It's about 3 feet long." The owner drove back from Detroit and picked up Wally that evening. Okay, here's the problem I have. The owner of the alligator, who was staying in the motel room, loses the 3-foot-long future wallet and matching shoes and just simply drives back home to Detroit without telling anybody that he lost what could be a dangerous reptile? Did he just simply pack his bags and say, "See you later, alligator"? Meanwhile, Bradenton, Florida police officer Michael Tolson's body camera captured a pizza delivery driver bringing a pie up to the front of a house. Tolson warned the driver to stop and suggested going around the back instead to avoid the alligator in the driveway. "I'm a little scared," the driver said, asking Tolson to make the delivery for him. About then, a woman walked out the front door. Tolson warned her about the gator. "Oh my God," the woman said. "Oh my heaven, that's a big alligator under my car." As Tolson continued to urge the woman to go back inside, she asked, "Where's my pizza?" Tolson fulfilled his assumed duties and delivered the pie to the back door, where the woman asked how much she owed. "I have no idea. I'm not the pizza man," Tolson replied. A trapper was brought in to relocate the gator to a rural part of the county. I believe the rural part of the county doesn't have pizza delivery. So, wait a minute. Did she actually pay for the pizza or not? I'm also assuming that the actual pizza delivery guy didn't get a tip. In Memphis, Tennessee, on March the 10th, 5 men were taken into custody after they emerged from their car at a busy intersection and started twerking. 4 of them danced around the vehicle while a 5th danced on the hood. Each was charged with obstruction of a highway or passageway. 18-year-old Mikkel Sanders, 22-year-old Rashawn Bryant, 18-year-old Mandraco Mays, and 18-year-old Desmond Sudbury were all released on their own recognizance. 19-year-old Jordan Smith had an outstanding warrant for vandalism and was fined $2,100. Have you noticed that when a sentence starts off with, "We started twerking," it really never ends well? Yeah. Some tourists are flying to the Big Apple for a single meal. Traveler Michaela Ian Perlman flew from her home in Bermuda to try Chef Kwame Onwachi's restaurant Tatiana before flying off to Colombia the very next day. While the trip set her back $350, she said it was worth it. Meanwhile, food influencer Jada Durden flew in from New Orleans to eat at Ramen by Ra. The round trip for her ticket set her only back about $38. Said Durden, "I could be back home the same day, so I was like, well, let me make a day trip out of it." Durden was back home by midnight.
I'll have what she's having.
No thanks, I'll pass. By the way, I hope they left a great tip. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program, with me, Peter Anthony Holder, on March the 6th, an Orange County, Florida sheriff's deputy responded to a fight at a 7-Eleven in Orlando. Apparently, a man and a woman had a tussle featuring a bizarre improvised weapon. According to the testimony of the 7-Eleven's employee who saw the fight, the involved man, Martin Milburn, had informed the woman of another man lying down next to the building. For some reason, Shanika Serdal heard him and didn't like what she heard. Serdal reportedly grabbed a can of Pringles from the shelf and pummeled Milburn in the face with it. The tube of snacks ripped up Milburn's right eyebrow and cheek, bad enough that he was bleeding when the authorities arrived. The cops found and arrested Serdal soon after near the 7-Eleven. She was still holding the bloodied can of Pringles. We couldn't confirm whether she intended to still eat them.
Pringles newfangled potato chips. Once you've tried them, other potato chips just don't stack up.
Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Cynthia Moore is an award-winning playwright and performer. She left the theater to get a master's degree in clinical psychology. She then worked as a mental health counselor for over 20 years. She has put her various talents together, teaching numerous workshops in creativity, writing from the heart, and more. She's also the author of the book Dancing on Coals, and she joins us via Zoom from Berkeley, California. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the program. Much appreciated. First of all, let's talk about your book and the title, Dancing on Coals. What does that mean to you?
Dancing on Coals is taken from an Anne Waldman poem, which is called Dancing with the Hungry Ghost. And the hungry ghost is a Buddhist concept of someone who is never satisfied, never has enough, does enough, is enough. And she's always dancing on coals. It's a little bit like remember the fairy tale of the red shoes?
Right.
That kind of a metaphor.
Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, you started out as a playwright and a performer, and you went into clinical psychology. Now, it just so happens that one of the friends of this show is someone who I've admired for years and years, and that's Dennis Palumbo, who was also a writer, and he became a psychologist many, many years ago in the California area. I know why he went the route he went. Why did you go the route you went?
Well, because I was in the theater, I was very extroverted and externally motivated. I was motivated to get recognition and acclaim and to be seen, and it was all very externalized. And at a certain point, I realized that wasn't doing it for me. It wasn't actually what I needed. So I completely did a pivot and decided to go internal instead. And so I took a couple of classes in psychology and I loved it. It was really dealing with the interior landscape and getting to know how the psyche works and how the soul works. And I fell in love.
So how did you, because you, as I said, were a playwright and a performer. That's something you wanted to do, but you pivoted. But how did you blend the two together?
Well, as you know, being a performer yourself of a kind, that when you're performing, you have to really access what they call the flow state. You have to be able to drop out of your current personality, if you will, and enter into a more receptive artistic state of inspiration. And that is very similar to actually what you do in psychology, in therapy. You help people to access a flow state. You help people to access different parts of their psyche. If they're having a lot of struggle and conflict, you can open up doors to joy. You can open up doors to spirituality. And being in the theater really helped me learn how to access those different states. And I could pass that on to my clients.
Now, you spend a career helping people. You also spent a previous career entertaining people. Is that one of the reasons why you wrote the book? Because it kind of feeds both parts of your personality?
Oh, that's very astute. I never thought of that, but that's a really good point. Yes, it does feed both parts, and it actually integrates both parts of my personality, which was a necessary accomplishment. I had to find a way to metabolize and integrate those two sides of myself. Exactly.
Okay, so tell us why you wrote the book, Dancing on Coals, and why you decided to write the book now. Why was it the good time to write this book?
Well, I started writing the book actually about 20 years ago when I quit the theater. I started it as a process of metabolizing why I needed to quit the theater and what I was trying to do with my life. And in the process of becoming a therapist and learning psychology and developing a new career, I started to change the book. So the whole second half of the book after I quit the theater is really in process. So for 20 years I kept reworking it, and I needed to figure out how to bring those two parts together, how to explain to myself the trajectory that my life had, how to make sense of it. So the book really did that for me. And it also, what I learned from it was the first editor I ever showed the book to said, "Well, this is great, but you're not vulnerable. I need you to be vulnerable." And I said, "What does that mean? I don't even know how to do that. I don't know what that means." And I had to learn how to go back and open my heart and reveal my vulnerabilities because readers don't want you to be closed. They don't want you to have it all together. They want to see where you're hurting, where you're struggling. And so that was a real process for me to learn how to do that and bring that into the material.
In the 20 years you were writing this book, I mean, you're the psychologist, so let me ask you this question. Did you ever think that maybe this is never going to end because I've been writing this for 20 years? And what was the moment when you said, yeah, I'm finished. The book should be out now?
Good question. I had this illusion that I would finish the book when I was enlightened. Once I was enlightened, I could write this book, I could finish it, and I would really have something to share with people. They could learn from it. And I realized at a certain point that that actually wasn't, well, it's not that it's not a possibility, but it's a floating state. And so I got to a point where I said, I'm enlightened enough. And that's when I realized that's really the message of the book is to be present, be calm, enjoy your present moment, be in your life, love your life, and that is enlightened enough.
Well, let's talk about your readers. When you were writing this book, and again, you wrote it over a period of time, and it changed during that period of time. So, in your mind, who were your readers? Why were you trying to reach them? And do you feel you've done this with the book? And in that process, you can describe what the book is about from your perspective.
Yeah, I think I wanted to really write for those people who, like me, made a certain kind of mistake in their lives, or I wouldn't even call it a mistake, but maybe those people who tried too hard, who were really striving, who were efforting to get somewhere, to find something, to be someone. And my discovery, my trajectory was to come off of that particular adrenaline high and start to find peace in myself and to figure out how to find peace in myself. I did a lot of meditation, been meditating for 38 years. That was a big part of my process. And I wanted to give people the visceral experience of what it feels like to go from that hungry ghost state of craving and striving and insatiability to a state of acceptance and peace. And I'm hoping that the book actually transmits that a bit through the writing, that it calms down, that the first half is a little frenetic and hyperactive, and the second half is more calming and more relaxing, and maybe even a kind of a portal into that state of ease and acceptance that I found in my life. So that's who I wanted to write for, people who need that, people who can appreciate that, people who want to read about that.
You talk about in the book your journey. You talk about your parents. You say some negative things about your parents. Was this process cathartic for you?
Uh, to some degree, yes. It's tricky with parents because every parent, every set of parents makes mistakes, and every set of parents can, if possible, be forgiven. And so I've forgiven my parents for their mistakes. There was some alcoholism, there was some verbal abuse, and I've forgiven them in the process. So in a way, that was cathartic. But it was also, I think what I got from it was recognizing how that early childhood was actually the catapult that launched me into this seeking for belonging, seeking for acceptance that was the first half of my life. So it was sort of the launch pad, if you will.
In the change that you've had in your career, do you miss the performing part of it?
Mm. Not really. When I did a reading recently and I was up in front of a crowd and I recognized that state of adrenaline and, there's a wonderful state of holding energy when you're standing up in front of people. And I love that. I'm acclimatized to that. I know how to do that. So that gets to, and when I did an audiobook recording, and that was really fun because I got to perform that. So do I still love it? Sure. Do I miss it? No, not really. I don't need the stress of that. I don't need the anxiety of that.
Your book has been endorsed by Whoopi Goldberg. How did that come about?
Well, Whoopi was a part of our theater company when we had a theater company in Berkeley for many years, and we were touring a show called Angel Window, Devil Door with the California Arts Council, sponsored by the California Arts Council. And we were down in San Diego, and this was a crazy physical athletic show, kind of a blend of Flannery O'Connor meets Barnum and Bailey. And it was very physical and ripping off Velcro suits and rubber chickens and a little bit of Southern Baptist holy roller stuff. And Whoopi saw us in San Diego and she said, I want to come and be a part of this. I've never seen anything like this because it was a new kind of theater. It was very different from the traditional theater that was on at that time, going on at that time. And so she came to Berkeley and joined us, and we did a few shows together, and we did a series of solo shows. And her solo show was discovered by Alice Walker, who lives in Berkeley, who wanted her for The Color Purple. And so Alice Walker connected her with Mike Nichols, and Mike Nichols put her solo show on Broadway, and she was literally discovered right in our small theater in Berkeley. It was one of those rags to riches stories right there in our backyard.
Wow. In writing the book, Dancing on Coals, I mean, you have led a life that pivoted. In doing this book and in sharing your story, does it make you think of what the next chapter of your life will be, or how different it will be based on what you've done in the past?
Well, who knows what the next chapter will be, right, Peter? We can't know that. And I think the best I can say is I'm open to whatever shows up. I have more books in me. I'm ready to go with another one or two that I've got in the chute. And I hope to keep writing. I hope to keep working with a very small handful of people that just occasionally want a tune-up from me because I love working with people. And I hope to keep traveling. And I have a wonderful family close by and a grandson that I adore. So I hope my life will be filled with those things, but who knows?
Well, congratulations on the book. The book is called Dancing on Coals, and I thank you very much, Cynthia, for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. Cynthia
Moore, author of Dancing on Coals. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0814, and you'll find the links to Cynthia's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
What's the best way to save your dad jokes? In a database!
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestuffileprogram. Coming to you from Canada, a place where fighting is frowned upon, unless it's on an ice rink. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. Now, the Stuff File presents Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. It's radio that's out of this world.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and the author of National Geographic's Backyard Guide to the Night Sky, and also National Geographic's Stargazer's Atlas, the Ultimate Guide to the Night Sky. And Andrew, on March 18th, after 9 months in space, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore finally returned from Gilligan's Space Station.
Yeah, exactly. What a saga that was, Peter? I mean, almost nearly 10 months in space, unexpectedly. It really does remind me of kind of like the Gilligan's Island because the scenario, because they were supposed to be there, right, for 8 days. And
right.
This was really just a reminder, I think, for everyone out there, is that this was a test mission, a shakedown mission of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. Now, Boeing has this huge contract, over $1 billion contract with NASA. Part of its commercial crew ventures that NASA set up is building out private contractors to create basically this Uber service for their astronauts in low Earth orbit, basically a taxi service to and from the space station. And so Boeing won this contract years ago, along with SpaceX. So SpaceX is Boeing's rival. So they were building their own spacecraft that would shuttle astronauts back and forth. And they've been going through a lot of cost overruns, huge schedule delays in development, and they've had a lot of hiccups with the Starliner thing. But this was kind of their final hurdle of having an actual human crew aboard for that 8-day test. And this was back in early June of last year. Everything went well. It was a picture-perfect launch. But then when they got into space, they started getting all these technical issues. So they had helium leaks, thruster malfunctions, all of this occurring as they were approaching the space station for docking. Luckily, they safely docked. But then engineers back on Earth at Boeing and NASA started to do some troubleshooting of the spacecraft. And it turns out that NASA was feeling very uncomfortable with the idea of the two astronauts returning back to Earth using Starliner. So they pushed their return flight back, meaning that they were staying aboard the space station, and they kept pushing it back throughout last summer. You and I talked a lot about this, I remember, of where this was going. And I don't think anyone really thought that it would be pushed back so far that here we are almost nearly 10 months later talking about it. But in the interim, they also basically dumped the Starliner, undocked it off the space station end of last summer. They made that final decision that they couldn't troubleshoot the spacecraft well enough remotely from Earth, that they needed to have it in the hangar on Earth to really understand what's going on. So they basically let it go, and it went down, it splashed down. It was fine. They had it, but that meant that the two astronauts had to wait for another ride. And guess what? It was a ride on Boeing's competitor, SpaceX Dragon crew capsule.
So let's flash forward to when they finally came home. I'm sure you watched this on March 18th.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a beautiful, you see how it went down. It's picture perfect how they, and I think what was interesting for me is that, it's 9 months of being on the station. It has a lot of physical effects on the human body. And so the recovery for them will be interesting to see how that will happen.
The one thing that I was watching when that came down is the marvel of technology that we have today, and it's just a simple idea of drone photography. Could you imagine if we had drone photography during the Apollo missions, either on the moon itself or during the splashdown, where you could see literally everything?
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of immediately. That's what caught my eye watching the footage that SpaceX was providing. It was interesting to see that most of that was through the drones, and that had a lot of the initial, it was literally as soon as it splashed down, we had close-up views of the capsule, right? It was really, and seeing the boats from a distance coming towards the camera. It's amazing what we can do with these small drones now.
Absolutely. But beyond that, one of the things that kind of annoyed me since the splashdown are the naysayers. And by that, I'm saying the conspiracy theorists, the Flat Earth Society, the people who believe that man never went to the moon. One of the things that was really intriguing was the pod of dolphins that was surrounding the capsule. I'm sure you saw that.
Beautiful.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And that's thanks again to a lot of that to the drone footage.
Yeah. People are online already saying, well, that's AI. It's like,
serious?
It's
really?
like, what is wrong with these people?
Why can't they just enjoy what nature provides and what we can see? It is what it is. It's, I think partly that, I think it's from folks maybe that have just been shuttered for too long. Everything with COVID and all this stuff. A lot of people are just not exposed to nature. I'm in the business of sharing nature in the sense of astronomy, the night sky. And, the disconnect that people have with the night sky is incredible. And that was very evident, actually, talking about drones, Peter. With all the stuff that was happening the last few months with the drones in New Jersey and, the northeastern U.S. Being invaded by drones. And a lot of stars were mistaken, like natural phenomena. Planets were being mistaken for drones or UFOs or whatever they want to call them now. It just shows this disconnect. And I think with this disbelief of even seeing dolphins around, it's really,
well,
it just speaks to that.
That leads to our next topic, and that is, since you are so steeped in stargazing, talk about the Starlink satellite train, which people are getting a chance to enjoy in the night sky.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned like I think with a caveat to enjoy depends on who you're talking to,
Yes.
because if you're talking to professional astronomers who make a living of using these giant telescopes on mountaintops, they may be a little bit more annoyed by these trains, basically these series of satellites that are now kind of polluting scientific photography of objects in the universe. These are caused by SpaceX's internet-based satellites that they're launching dozens at a time for the last few years. And these are just creating what they're calling mega constellations of high-speed internet satellites. So the idea here is that SpaceX has created these set of satellites, very small satellites, but numerous, numbering eventually in the tens of thousands, that envelop our entire planet so that any location, any remote location would have access to high-speed internet without having the traditional cellular towers nearby. So really remote, like you could be, on Mount Everest and get high-speed internet if you wanted to, or in the deserts of Namibia, you would be anywhere to be able to get high-speed, which is great because it democratizes access to this technology. However, the downside is that it is polluting low Earth orbit. But with that said, everyday people can see the effects for themselves by looking up. If they know when and where to look, you can see very soon after these satellites are launched into space, within hours and the first few days, you can see a train of them, like a series, one after the, like a row of ducks. These pinpoints of very bright lights that traverse the sky. In a matter of a few minutes, you can see them move from one part of the sky to the other. It's actually quite dramatic. Some people, it's very eye-catching, so much so that it's actually caused a lot of mistaken identity in terms of like UFOs, like alien technology that people are seeing. Social media feeds are filled with these Starlink satellite videos. It's very, very, like I said, eye-catching to see this. You can actually find very easily if you just Google websites like something called like a Starlink locator, and you can actually put in your geographical location wherever you are around the world, and it generates when the next satellite visibility will cross your local sky. And it's something that it's bright enough to see even within urban city limits. So you don't have to be out in the dark countryside. It's very evident. It's brilliant enough to, even if you're in a large downtown city, you'd be able to see these string of lights going by.
Do you consider them, as someone who does this for a living, do you consider them something that is, bright, twinkly lights like a string of Christmas tree lights, or do you consider it a nuisance as well?
I think for casual sky watchers, I think it's really neat. It's in terms of as an educator, in that sense, it allows me as a great entry point into getting people interested in the night sky, excited. But as a avid amateur astronomer who loves to take photographs of the night sky through telescopes and things like that, it is a nuisance. I know SpaceX has tried to mitigate the brilliance of these individual satellites by painting them at a darker color. They do lessen in their brightness as they reach their final orbits. It's usually just after launch, the first day or so, where they're very, very bright. Then they kind of disperse and they go higher up in orbit and they're not as bright. So I know they're trying to get them to be less of a nuisance, so I appreciate that, but it's still there, and it is still a serious concern, especially when we're talking about tens of thousands. I think there's upwards of 40,000 that SpaceX is planning on putting up. They have already 7,000 Starlink satellites. As of February 2025, they have over 7,000 functioning, and they want to go up to 40-some thousand. And that's just one service. You have to remember that Amazon is building their own satellite service, and also other countries like China want to be in this competitive business sphere, and they're envisioning tens of thousands of their own. So we're going to be swarmed by this. This is just the start of it.
Wow. Now, we often end up talking too long on the regular program, and we often go to Patreon, but we're not going to do that this time. This will be a double segment for everyone who listens to the Stuff File program. This won't be on Patreon. So we're going to take a quick break because we want to get back to some of the things that you want to talk about, the Blue Ghost Moonlander, and also the James Webb Telescope. The data is now available online, and the ISS has a live streaming service. So we'll get to that in a moment.
Sounds great.
We have Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, here on the Stuff File program. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
April Fool's Day is the one day a year when people critically examine news articles before accepting them as true.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Michael Liebling is the author of The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. It's a page-turning thriller. You say you've read other serial killer novels? Oh, as Michael will tell you, not like this one.
It's not like any serial killer novel you've read before. It really goes behind the scenes. So when I say he takes a wife, you've got to imagine what it's like to be the offspring of somebody who's murdered multiple people. So how do you live with yourself after that? And you were just a kid when it all happened. If you fall in love, how do you tell the woman you love your dad was a serial killer? And how would she react? So the title, it's not entirely clear, but as you get into it, it will become very clear.
The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. It's a recipe for mystery with a scoop of humor and a sprinkle of horror. The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. Available now at Amazon and wherever you buy books.
This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. This broadcast is coming to you from upstairs. Get out of the house.
And we are talking to Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, who is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, and the National Geographic's Backyard Guide to the Night Sky is one of his books. And the other book is National Geographic's Stargazer's Atlas, The Ultimate Guide to the Night Sky. And normally we do this second segment on Patreon, but we decided let's let the entire audience hear this particular one. So as I said before the break, one of the things you wanted to talk about was the Blue Ghost Moonlander. There's a lot of independent companies that are trying to get to the moon, and this is just one of them. What are your feelings about the Blue Ghost Moonlander?
I think this is just the start of a whole new era where we're going to see a lot of private companies, small and large, that are going to be entering this arena of doing lunar exploration. There's a lot riding on this, of course, because NASA has plans with its Artemis missions of returning humans back to the moon. And the fact is that there's a lot of things we're not quite sure about where we're going to be landing on the moon when humans do go there. And when we do select these specific sites on the moon of characterizing what these lunar environments are like. And so there's a lot of space for private industry to come in, do it more cheaply and faster in terms of returns on their on investment, especially with large contracts from NASA on the line. So NASA's kind of already thinking and is doing currently farming out these missions that test out technologies for them that will eventually be used in the Artemis missions, or at least help support the Artemis missions that are going to take humans back to the moon. And when we do, by the way, go back to the moon, it's not to just pick up some rocks and come back after a few days like we did with Apollo, half a century ago. We're going to be staying there for longer periods of time, 1 week, 2 weeks, then setting up a habitat area where a research station that'll be constantly crewed, just like what we see in Antarctica. That's kind of like the template for what we want to do on the moon. And so to get there, these private companies are just trying to scout out locations, see what kind of natural resources there are, how dangerous the environment is, just characterize everything. And that's what this little Blue Ghost lander that survived for 2 weeks, was highly successful. I think it was just a fantastic mission. Firefly Aerospace, a small U.S. company that had this contract with NASA and had NASA experiments on board, science experiments to help characterize the environment, which is amazing because it went down so well. And, after 2 weeks, once the lunar night came and darkness came onto the landing site, it shut down as predicted. But before it did that, it sent back, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Peter, but it sent back an amazing picture of the Earth above the horizon of the moon. And you could see the silhouette of the lander in front on the surface of the moon. It's very inspiring.
Yeah, and there was also great pictures of a sunrise, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was actually more than a sunrise. It was a solar eclipse from the moon. So we actually had a total lunar eclipse happen here on Earth. It was on March 14th. So everyone in the Western Hemisphere, places like North America and South America, looking up on the night of March 14th, saw the moon enter into the shadow of the Earth and then turn into this beautiful orange-red coloration. Some people call it the blood moon. That's what it's popularly known as. But what was interesting, at that very same time on March 14th, while we had the lunar eclipse, this little robot lander on the moon looked back at our planet at the height of that eclipse. And from their perspective, they saw Earth, like the robot, basically took pictures of the sun moving behind our planet. And you saw what looked like a bright, fiery ring of light surrounding the limb of all around the edge of our planet. And that was our atmosphere lit up by the sunlight traveling through it. And it was orange-red in color because that is how the light from the sun is bent or refracted by the particles in the air of our atmosphere. It was incredible to see a solar eclipse happen because our planet got in the way of the sun from a perspective from another world.
And it's interesting because you mentioned the color of the light. We see the sun, or we shouldn't be seeing the sun because you shouldn't look directly at it, but we see the sun as an orange ball or a yellow ball, but that's because it's our atmosphere. When in reality, for instance, the picture on the moon of just the sun, it's like a white light because there's no moon atmosphere.
That's right. So there's no atmosphere on the moon. So you see the actual intrinsic light, type of light that the sun has. And what was very interesting is that this whole effect of the blood moon, right? So why we see the moon turn red during a total lunar eclipse when we look up in the sky during the eclipse,
right?
That's because the sunlight is, of course, hitting our planet, right? And on its way to the moon. But before it gets to the moon, goes through the atmosphere or the ring around the edge of our planet. We have that little thin column of air, and the particles, be they like dust particles or ash or smoke or whatever it is in the atmosphere that's floating around, then it bends the light towards the sunlight from that whitish yellow color to a orange-red coloration. It's the same physics that happens as why we see sunsets as orange-red, because it's going through that thick column of air and it refracts the light or bends the sunlight towards the red part of the spectrum. So that then travels through our atmosphere and gets cast onto the disk of the moon that we see in front of us. And so when Firefly, the little robot lander, looked at our planet during the maximum eclipse time, it saw that reddish coloration surrounding the edge of our planet, that which then travels and hits the moon itself. So if you and I, Peter, were on, and this is a great kind of like thought experiment, if we were on the moon, think about what the coloration of the land around us, the lunar landscape, would be at the height of this eclipse. It would be orange-red. Everything would be bathed in an eerie orange-red coloration.
Well, we don't have time constraints when we do this on Patreon because we can go ad nauseum, but we do have time constraints on the regular show. So I got to get two quick things in. in less than 2-3 minutes. So this is the speed round. The James Webb Telescope data is now available online. Have you looked at this?
I've looked at a little bit at it. There's so much there because what basically this is sort of a compilation of specifically the planets that it's finding, the exoplanets. If people go onto the Webb Space Telescope website, they can go and look and search through this archive of all these exoplanets, planets around other stars that the James Webb is finding. And, it's already racked up something like over 130 planets or so or more, and it's always increasing in the number. And it's amazing to see all these alien worlds being cataloged. It's the most successful telescope in being able to do that. And of course, we're waiting for the moment where it finds an Earth-like world, something that's the size of our planet, maybe with an atmosphere that's similar to ours. That's kind of like the holy grail. But it's amazing to be able to see all these extrasolar planets being cataloged live on this website.
Well, what's been described on Star Trek as an M-class planet, basically 1 hour of ours. Can the James Webb merely with pictures see the kind of atmosphere that a planet has, or just speculate?
We can actually see it, but what it does is it looks, because we just don't have enough resolution power even with the James Webb Telescope. It's not strong enough to actually see the planet and details. But we can detect the atmosphere, the light from the planet, and dissect that light, look at the basically chemical fingerprints, and can determine if it does have an atmosphere, one, and what kind of chemicals are in that atmosphere, the chemistry of it. Does it have oxygen, carbon dioxide? Are there pollutants in there? Is there chlorophyll? These are compounds that are indicative of perhaps life. And this is something that James Webb can help identify.
And finally, the ISS has a new live streaming service of the Earth that's 24/7. Have you taken a look at this?
It's incredible, that you were talking about I just wish I wish I had a 4K television to really look at this on my big screen. Because this is sort of like I'm in heaven, being able to see the Earth, just moving under it. Remember, it's going at 17,000 kilometers per hour, and to have 4K cameras streaming this ultra high definition views of our planet from 400 kilometers above, it's incredible. And this was set up just about a year ago, March 2024. Was the SpaceX Dragon capsule actually delivered these cameras, and it's attached to the European Space Agency's Columbus module, and it basically includes 3 cameras, and it provides 3 different unique views of the space around the space station itself and the Earth below, including this amazing wide-angle lens that captures the curvature of the Earth's horizon. It's absolutely amazing.
Well, as I said earlier, this is something else for the Flat Earth Society to complain about.
Exactly. The curvature is right there. You can't deny it.
You can't deny it. And on another note, it's one of those situations where, we've had the technology around for a couple of years. It almost seems kind of late for them to say, we've got an aha moment. In 2024, we'll put these cameras on.
Sooner or later, they're going to have to accept the facts. That's the way I see it, because technology is just going to keep getting better, and more people are going to be going into space too. So even perhaps flat earthers.
Yeah, they're going to say it's AI. Anyway.
Who knows?
Let them continue to watch the cave drawings. On that note, sir, we are out of time for this segment. How can people find you?
Folks can reach me on my website, thenightskyguy.com. But of course, even better than that, just go to all my social feeds, like on Facebook and X. I'm on YouTube under, of course, The Night Sky Guy, where I give regular updates on what is happening in your night sky, wherever you are in the world. Easy, casual night watching. That's what it's all about.
Thank you very much, sir.
My pleasure. Clear skies.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0814, and you'll find links to Andrew's site to get your very own personalized autographed copy of his books. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
2 men were arrested in the wee hours of the morning last week after a police search following a drive-through disturbance in Carlton Place near Ottawa yielded quantities of illegal drugs, a replica firearm, and other drug-related material. Police were called to the unnamed restaurant at around 12:45 a.m. An early clue that things were amiss was the discovery of a homemade cardboard license plate on one of the vehicles. 2 men were arrested, and a search led to the discovery of about 23 grams of suspected cocaine, 37 pills of suspected MDMA, a replica firearm, and other drug-related gear. 42-year-old Kevin Langlois of Kingston and 30-year-old Dylan Mullen-Bégin of Ottawa were both charged with 2 counts of possession of a Schedule I substance and failure to comply with a probation order. Langlois was also charged with using an altered license plate. The accused were held for a bail hearing before the Ontario Court of Justice in Perth. Now, regular listeners know that people on drugs or are inebriated via alcohol aren't allowed to be the idiots of the day because you have to be of somewhat sound mind to qualify. But they weren't high, and that's not the reason why they're nominated. I mean, why? Oh, why? If you're hauling illegal drugs, would you try to fabricate a homemade cardboard license plate for your vehicle? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0814. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestuffile.com. And once again, Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0814. Email me at peter@thestuffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as P.A. Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WLSL-LP FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZH-LP FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. I'm your humble announcer, Ben Patrick Johnson. Don't let Peter fool you. This program will be nothing without me. What you hear in the rest of the show isn't even Peter's real voice. It's all special effects. His actual voice has officially been deemed as torture by the Geneva Convention.